Take a moment and let a chilling thought settle in. You are worried about inflation. You are stressed about the mortgage rate. You see prices for everything you need, from petrol to groceries, climbing out of control. And yet, the financial authorities keep telling you that the system is resilient. They tell you that we have learned the lessons of history, particularly the one financial trauma that defines economic fear in the English-speaking world, 1929. They want you to believe that the Great Depression was the worst it can get, a painful but contained event that taught the West how to manage a financial crash. But here is the critical, terrifying truth they are obscuring. 1929 didn't end the same way, because the debt crisis looming today is not just larger, it is a different species of monster, perhaps 10 times bigger, and infinitely more dangerous. Stop thinking about a collapse like the 1930s. Start thinking about a slow, suffocating financial doom. In 1929, the fear was deflation. Money was scarce, prices fell, and debt became impossible to pay because the currency was tied to gold. The system was brutal, but it had constraints. Today, your greatest threat is inflation. Money is abundant, prices soar, and the debt mountain is too big to fail, designed to be managed only by devaluing the currency you hold. We are living through an experiment in global finance that no stable civilization has ever dared to run. We have engineered a worldwide debt mountain, public, private, household and corporate, that now exceeds $300 trillion. This is not an arbitrary number. It is an unimaginable sum, a weight so enormous that the mere annual interest payments on it now eclipse the entire economic output of major economies. If the 1929 crisis was a manageable forest fire that eventually burned itself out through painful liquidation, the current crisis is a subterranean volcano of leverage, fueled by endless printing and ready to erupt in a cataclysm of inflated promises that will wipe out the savings of an entire generation. The path to this moment was paved by a singular, destructive choice made by the financial elites of the West. To understand the sheer danger, you need to understand the lie of stability sold after World War II. For decades, the global system, designed at Bretton Woods, was anchored to the US dollar, which was in turn anchored to gold. This provided an unprecedented era of growth and financial confidence for the American, the Briton, the Canadian, and the Australian citizen. You could trust your money because governments promised it was backed by something real. Debt was constrained because governments could not simply print their way out of problems. If they printed too much, other countries would demand payment in gold, forcing accountability. This gold anchor was the single powerful brake on the debt monster. But as governments spent relentlessly on wars, from Vietnam to the Cold War, and on expansive welfare states throughout the 1950s and 60s, the stress became unbearable. The United States was funding its empire with dollars that the rest of the world suspected were no longer backed by the claimed amount of gold. This tension exploded into the pivotal, irreversible decision known as the Nixon Shock of 1971. With a single televised address, the US unilaterally ended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. This decision did not just remove an economic policy, it destroyed the powerful constraint that had governed global finance for centuries. The idea that money must be anchored to something tangible was thrown out the window. Suddenly, the dollar, and by extension every major currency in the English-speaking world tied to it, was backed by nothing more than a promise. This meant governments, including yours, could borrow trillions without limit. Central banks were no longer merely custodians of reserves. They became manufacturers of currency, free to inject as much liquidity as they desired. The historical precedent is staggering. Every empire in history that gave its rulers the power to create money without limit, from the Romans debasing their denarius to Weimar Germany printing Reichsmarks, collapsed into ruin. The difference now is that the entire world, led by the West, adopted the trick simultaneously. This change transformed debt from a regulated tool into an unshackled financial weapon. And this is the core reason the modern crisis is fundamentally different from 1929. The deflationary system of the 1930s was self-correcting through pain. The fiat system of today is designed to keep the debt alive forever by slowly, silently stealing the value of your labor and your savings through inflation. A theft that happens every time the government borrows another dollar. The architects of this system knew exactly what they were doing when they removed the brake. The greatest consequence of the 1971 shift was the fundamental corruption of prudence in financial markets, leading directly to the colossal, unsustainable debt bubble of today. When money was hard, mistakes were fatal. When money became soft, mistakes became opportunities, and the debt machine shifted into hyperdrive. The Western financial elite, having learned the historical lesson of debt leading to violent resets, jubilees, did not seek to contain debt. They sought to weaponize it. They realized the ultimate product you can sell is not physical goods or services, but the future itself, and the charge for selling the future is interest. By institutionalizing national debt, the political and banking classes created a perfect partnership. The government borrows endlessly to fund its agenda, and the banker profits from the interest, which is funded by the taxes and savings of the common citizen. The age of fiat currency demanded the financial engineering of leverage. This is how the system grew 10 times larger. Leverage, using debt to multiply returns, became reckless in a system awash in unbacked currency. The shadow banking system exploded, operating outside traditional oversight, using short-term debt to buy long-term, high-interest assets, creating enormous, fragile profits based on promises piled on top of promises. The crisis of 2008 was the first major warning shot of this fiat-fueled era. It was not a stock market crash like 1929. It was the near collapse of the entire financial plumbing, triggered by trillions in leveraged packaged debt. The core of 2008 was too much debt and a sudden loss of confidence in the financial instruments. Crucially, the government response was not to allow the inevitable liquidation of bad debt, the painful but necessary cleansing of the system. Instead, they used the newly unlimited power of the central bank to pump trillions of new currency into the system through quantitative easing and direct bailouts. By saving the banks, the governments of the US and UK achieved two things that cemented the 10 times larger problem. First, they guaranteed that the too big to fail rule was permanent, encouraging even more reckless leverage. Second, and most insidious, they ensured that the debt never had to die. They simply transferred the bad debt from private balance sheets directly onto national balance sheets, masking the problem while massively inflating the total debt bubble to keep the system running. This is the central difference from 1929. In the 1930s, the system was allowed to liquidate. In the 2000s, the elite used unlimited printing power to prevent the liquidation. The consequence is that the debt mountain is not just 10 times bigger than the debt preceding 1929, it is structurally immortal under the current system. The only way to service a $300 trillion global debt is through permanent inflation, a silent, government-mandated theft that devalues your money every day. Your paycheck is the target. Your retirement fund is the collateral, and this silent confiscation will continue until the vast paper promise is finally revealed for what it is, a dangerous illusion.